redeems and sustains us. Amen.
Amen.
Recently, I had a phone conversation with someone. It wasn't really a conversation, I suppose. It was more like a bombardment. The person I was speaking to was angry, not with me, although the force of their anger made it feel like it was directed at me. They were hurt and they were upset, so they were irrational and nasty. At one point, they said, "I have prayed about this," and then proceeded to use that as justification for their continued anger and their vitriol. It was unpleasant to listen to and to experience their worst side. I wondered what form their prayer took. I couldn't imagine that God would want them to stay in such a negative place or be so unreasonable in their actions towards another person who hadn't intended to hurt them at all. Given my experience on the phone, I imagined that their prayer had taken a similar form, an outpouring of years of built-up frustration and hurt and grief manifest into this spitting and spiraling tumble of angry words. Now, there's definitely a time and a place for venting, for being open and honest about how we feel, and for giving voice to our ugliest emotions and feelings. But I wondered if this person had been able to stop at any point and listen, or if their idea of prayer was to talk and to ask and to be listened to. In today's readings, we've met a variety of different characters, and often these passages are prefaced with the words, "The Lord calls Samuel," and "Jesus calls Philip and Nathanael," which is a decent summary, but it puts the emphasis on God's actions. Whereas today, I'd like us to think about the human responses, and not just of Samuel, Philip and Nathanael, but of Eli as well. In fact, I want to focus mostly on Eli. Eli, with his abysmal track record as a priest, who let his sons turn the house of the Lord into a brothel, and who was complicit in their greedy extortion of the people who came to the shrine to worship. Eli, who previously encountered a barren and grieving Hannah, who was pouring out her heart and her longing for a child to God in prayer, and who immediately judged her. Her lips were moving, but her voice was not audible, so Eli assumed she was drunk. He didn't read the situation properly at first. Or to put it another way, in the absence of words, he was unable to listen to what was happening. Hannah had to spell things out to him, plead with him, and he eventually gave her a blessing. Now, in today's reading, we meet him again years later, caring for Hannah's child Samuel, entrusted with him despite his incompetence in raising his own sons, at a time when the word of the Lord was rare and visions were not widespread. The spiritual life of the nation, and perhaps Eli's own spiritual life, is so muted that he once again is unable to hear. But, as the reading said, the lamp of the Lord had not yet gone out. God speaks, and it takes 3 attempts for Eli to listen to Samuel and to recognize God's call. There's something so encouraging about this ineffectual old man, weak in spirit, who nevertheless is not abandoned by God, who is indeed used by God, despite his previous failings, to raise the boy Samuel into a trustworthy prophet. In the words of priest and theologian Rosalind Brown, perhaps this call of Samuel was as much a call of Eli to pick up the shreds of his ministry and keep going with renewed commitment and faithfulness. And then we have Nathanael, young, convinced that nothing good could come out of Nazareth, unable to listen to his friend Philip's words, unable to listen to God until he came face to face with him in human form. God revealed to unworthy people in unexpected ways. And as we journey through Epiphany, we are invited to think about how God's glory is revealed around us. The stories we have heard today emphasize the need for us to listen so that we can recognize God, and so that ultimately we can be transformed so that God's glory may be revealed through us. Just after New Year, I received a message from a dear friend who told me that every year she likes to have a word or a phrase to frame her year, to set as an intention. I had just sent her a poem I thought she might like, and she was messaging me to say that the timing was wonderful, as she'd just decided that her word for the year was poetry. She asked if I had something that I was focusing on. I hadn't actually given it specific thought. I'd been so taken up with family matters over the year's threshold that I hadn't even journaled or given any intentional thought to closing off one year and opening up to another. I wonder if many of us feel the same way. 2020 has sort of just whimpered into 2021, and not much seems to have changed. The hope that we may have felt throughout 2020, the sense that next year this will all be behind us, has possibly slipped away, or at least been diluted by another lockdown. My friend's question stopped me and made me think. But not for long, because as soon as I asked myself, the phrase was there. It's been there for a while, and it's definitely the phrase that I would like to carry throughout this year with me. It's from Psalm 46. Be still and know that I am God. Stillness has been forced upon me over the past year. Like I'm sure many of you, I'm inherently curious. I love to travel. I've always had an active social life, but I've been grounded by the pandemic, and I've had to learn to engage with the world around me and with God in a different way. I've had to be still and come to know God in the stillness. I've had to learn to listen in a different way. Just before Christmas, I bought myself this as a reminder of that mantra. So in many ways, this phrase was my intention for the year, even though I hadn't recognized it as such until my friend asked me outright. So my question to each of you is, what is yours? What is your phrase or word or intention for this year? How is God speaking to you at the moment? How are you listening to God? Is God a small, still, but persistent voice nagging you out of slumber, like in the story of Eli and Samuel? Is God defying your expectations by coming to you in the shape of someone or something unexpected, like what happened to Nathaniel? Or is God speaking to you in the silence? Some of us are going to the Lectio Divina course. Perhaps we're hearing God speak through sacred text in a new way. Maybe we're encountering familiar stories in unfamiliar ways. Some of us might be using this slow time, this enforced stillness, to be creative and to hear God speaking through our creativity. Some of us might be reconnecting with people we used to struggle to make time for, and perhaps they're speaking into our lives in ways that are transforming us. Some of us might be out in nature more. We might be taking time to notice small changes around us that we're usually too busy to see. Maybe we're starting to recognize birdsong or buds and starting to feel more connected to nature. Whatever we're doing to make this lockdown bearable, I would encourage us all to listen, to be still, and to find God revealed in unexpected ways and in unexpected places. And so I leave you with these words that my friend sent me. Words by the writer Elizabeth Gilbert, quoted in a book called Soulful Nature. Be still and wonder at what you don't yet know about God's place within this place. Listen for what peace sounds like within nature. Imagine what God loves about this particular moment. Watch for where your curiosity takes you. Amen.
Amen.